Hi, and welcome back to Rate That Album, a back and forth album review kind of retrospective between myself, Joe Fremming, and Paul Muad'Dib. Paul, how are you
Yes,
doing
sir.
today?
Well, all those things that we talked about last episode, where I thought we weren't going to get things done, and I was talking about things in the future, they're going to be uploaded faster. So don't pay no mind to the end of some of the things that I say that are coming up because you'll have them. I finally got my lazy ass and started doing things, so I feel good. I'm like energized.
Yeah. The SoundCloud, Spotify, I notice are just loaded with new material for people to listen to, and we're just doling them out a little slower on the Joe Down website just because since it's kind of the curation of it all, like I just don't want things to get, well, not just me, you and I decided to just, we don't want things falling by the wayside on that. So
Mhm. Yeah, I don't want to just bring out like 6 videos of one thing, right? I want to be able to have, because there's all sorts of really cool content on the Joe Down, and I like that drip feed that it gets there for people so they can kind of digest what's there for a little bit before they get the new stuff.
yeah, no, it's really good. And I just want to say I'm really enjoying the new crew on Cast That Movie. So
Mm-hmm.
keep up the good work there.
Thank,
Uh,
thank you. I will say also we got Jode's blessing on them, by the way, so that is awesome. Jode Scott was totally on board with them taking his spot for this season.
nice. Yeah. Hopefully we'll get Jode back at some point with some. We'll get him at least for the Office podcast at some point.
And he might be a guest on this podcast.
Ooh,
Mm-hmm.
I am very interested in that. But Paul,
Yes, sir.
where do we go from here?
For the whole world to see?
Yes. Today we are talking about a band called Death. Paul, what do you know about the band Death?
Nothing. I knew of a like 80s metal band called Death, and this is not it. So I know nothing about this band.
Yeah, I think you were a little nervous when I brought this one up because it definitely sounds like it's going to be either like a death metal band or maybe an 80s metal band. It's not. Would you like to hear a little bit about the story of Death?
I need to know the story of Death because I love this. And yes, please, I want to know the story. Tell me, because I know there is one here.
Well, Paul, I am here to oblige that. Okay. So we got to go back in time into the 60s. Three brothers, the Hackney brothers, in Detroit, Michigan, they decided after seeing the Beatles on television that they want to be musicians. They might have been a little influenced by that, but just seeing rock and roll music, it really kind of lit the fire. And so they start playing and jamming around, and then they start taking it more seriously. And for a while, they're kind of like a funk rock, like R&B hybrid. The kind of the spearhead of this band is David Hackney. He sees the Who in the late 60s, early 70s, and he's like, "Nope, we're going to be a rock band." And I just want to preface: these are three black guys in the movie, in the documentary, a band called Death. It's available on YouTube to rent. I highly suggest it. It's on Vudu for free with commercials. They are in Detroit, Michigan. And at this time, music is pretty divided. Like rock music is dominated by white dudes,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people, like if you're a black man or a group of black guys, you're kind of expected to do like Motown or soul or funk. And don't get me wrong, that influences these guys a lot. But as they're playing and they're playing in their parents' house, and their mom gives them leeway to play, and they're getting louder and faster, and they're just loving it. And their neighbors hate it. They don't like this kind of music. They call it white boy music. And this just inspires them to play it harder and faster and more aggressive. And then in the early 70s, their father, who was a priest, they grew up in a religious household. He is killed by a drunk driver as he's driving a coworker to the hospital. This really does a number on the three guys. They're fairly young, and David is kind of the visionary of this band. And he's if you watch the documentary, he's a very creative guy. Like he figured out how to create an echo on their home telephone to freak people out with prank calls. So he's like almost like a genius, I would say. Like he's just this really smart, creative guy. But the death of their father takes a toll, and one day he's like, guys, I got the name of our band. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be groundbreaking. And the two other brothers are like, oh man, this is great, and they're all excited. He's like, we're gonna be called Death. And it goes over just as much as you'd expect in the early 70s. But like they're brothers and they want to support David, so they decide to go under the name Death.
Awesome.
So they're playing around, and they tell Danis and Bobby are the rhythm section, and they tell David that they should probably try to get a record deal if they take this more seriously. They end up recording what we hear on this album at United Sounds Production Studios, which is a big recording studio in Detroit at that time. And the people at the studio are like very intrigued because this is such weird and different music. It's very aggressive. It's, they're used to again, it's the city of Motown. Like, frankly, this is punk rock. I mean, there's no getting around it. What they're making it's not the DNA of punk rock. This is like, they're doing Dead Kennedys like 10, 15 years before there's Dead Kennedys. So the studio's interested, and they record what turns out to be the 7 songs on this album. And the studio's excited, and they try shopping it, and the big sticking point is the name of the band. No label wants to sign on a band called Death. It's not the best news. At one point, Clive Davis at Columbia was interested, offered them a $20,000 deal, but they'd have to change the name. David just straight up says no. His thinking pretty much was like, if they take our name, they'll take everything. So that happens. And then their last gasp is they print 500 copies of a single containing the songs Politicians in My Eyes, backed with Keep on Knocking. And they get these to like radio stations. They get some airplay, but not a lot. It's so different from what was coming out at that time. You're thinking of like, so this is 75. We're still a few years away from Ramones and, The Clash and all these like bands that kind of bring in this kind of more aggressive, faster pace, a little more angry music. So they're kind of, all right, they tried it. Nothing's going to happen. They kind of go on their separate ways. The two brothers, Danis and Bobby, end up in New England. David sticks around Detroit. And time goes by. Unfortunately, David in the early 2000s dies of lung cancer from smoking. Just a heavy smoker. Before he dies, he gives the master tapes to his brothers, and they're like, hold on to these because one day somebody's going to come looking for this. And they're like, oh, God, more stuff that we have to keep in our attic, So in the mid-2000s, the early to mid-2000s, after all this, record collectors are it's becoming more entwined with the internet. So people are communicating more. It's easier to find these records. Some Jello Biafra of the Dead Kennedys comes across a 45 of Death and blows his mind. One of the guys who did the artwork for the band Death in the 70s, he just had a bunch of 45s that he was supposed to farm out to people just to get the name out. He just never did it. So he goes to a record store and he's like, here's a bunch of 45s of this band. I mean, you guys might be interested in it. As time goes on, it's just all of a sudden MP3s start floating around. It appears on Chunklet. It's like people are just like, who is this band? At this time, Bobby Hackney's son, Julian, moves to California, and he's at a party where the DJ's spinning rare 45s, and he hears his father's voice in a punk song. It should be noted at this point, his dad and brother, the rhythm section, they remained musicians, but they became more of a reggae band, a little more softer toned than Death. He freaks out. He calls his dad, like, were you in a band in the 70s called Death? And Bobby's like, wow, I haven't heard about that in a long time. After a while, the record label Drag City hears these MP3s and become interested. And they want to know if there's more, if they could put out an album. The brothers, agree to it. And lo and behold, for the whole world to see, finally, after 35 years, sees the light of day. It's big enough to the point the New York Times writes an article on it, as also does Jack White, writing the New York Times on his first reaction to this album. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. When I was told the history of the band and what they'd record and what year they recorded this music, it just didn't make sense. Ahead of punk and ahead of their time. So, Paul, that is the crib notes of Death.
Okay. Okay. When I looked at this thing and saw it was 2009, I was like, all right. And then when I listened to it, it had that warm sound that you don't get, that was gone in like the late 80s, early 90s. So when I saw 2009, I'm like, how did they do this? Like, was this recorded did they actually record on tape and then convert that to digital? Because it has that sound. If this truly was made in 1975, this is like, remember the Highlander when they talk about finding that sword? Like, it doesn't make sense. This is, when she talks about like finding the metal for the Highlander sword and how it doesn't make sense because swords like that weren't made for like hundreds of years. This truly is then the absolute Adam and Eve genesis of punk. This has to be.
Yeah, it is. It's before punk is punk. I mean, when you listen to these tracks, you can hear the Ramones. You can hear Black Flag, and I mean, there's even hardcore elements in this. It's crazy.
And when you look at punk rock in 1975, because I want to talk a little bit. I love going in the history of these things, right? So let's talk about punk in 1975 and what was there. I mean, you didn't have punk in 1975. In 1974, you had the New York Dolls, and this is before that. I mean, that was proto. This is like legit 80s prime punk. Like, this doesn't make sense that this is in 1975. You did not get sounds like this until the late, like the second wave of punk in, like 78, 79, when you started to see other bands, like the Buzzcocks. This is 2 years before the Buzzcocks even started. This is more along the line of that classic punk that came out of bands like the Ramones, bands like the Dead Kennedys. I mean, this feels like it came out of that entire genre. Am I wrong on that? I mean, this is more hardcore punk. This is like Black Flag. This is like Pay to Come. I mean, hardcore ass punk.
Yeah, it's a lot harder than that first wave. Like, it's harder than the Ramones. Mm-hmm. It's harder than Television and Patti Smith and what have you. And again, when you think of punk and you think of an all-black punk band, I can only really think of Bad Brains. I'm sure there's a lot more, and this is years before any of it even happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is I can't even get into it. God, I wish I had my Spotify list. This is like the Vandals, but taken seriously, right? I can't even, because the Punks were way softer than this. Like I can't even in 1975 think of anyone that was doing something close to this. To me, if I had to compare this in any way, shape, or form, it did the world a disservice that this didn't come out in 1975, because this would be like Frank Zappa's first album. The same, Freak Out. This would be like Freak Out coming out in 1969. This would be that, except for the punk world. And punk would have had a much more robust history, I think, had this come out.
Yeah. And you got to remember, when this comes out, punk is not even a thing.
No, punk did not. I want to make it very clear. Proto-punk did not start really until 77, 78.
Yeah.
I mean, punk was applied to a scene in general, but not a style of music at the time.
Yeah. I mean, and it's weird because they're from Detroit, and I can think of two other bands from Detroit that came close to this, but like really were not as good. And I love these bands, and that'd be the MC5 and the Stooges. Mm-hmm. But it feels like Death took it to a whole new level.
Yeah, it took it to a whole new level. There was nothing like that coming out of Detroit. And it does them a disservice. I think had they been in New York, I think had they been in Los Angeles, I think they would have been okay with the band named Death, because like I said, when you talked about this, I thought we were going to cover the death metal band Death that started in 1984. So 9 years later, the band was able to take that name and run with it. Well, within 9 years.
Either way, they're, because at this time, Death they're done. Like, the band's no more.
Yeah. And
they're just like a curio that record collectors have a 45 of.
I want to name some of like the top music that was coming out in 1975 to give people like the historical. Jive Talkin' by the Bee Gees. Rhinestone Cowboy by Glenn Campbell. Sister Golden Hair by America. James Taylor, How Sweet It Is. Elton John. Shining Star by Earth, Wind, and Fire. Fame by David Bowie. Nothing comes close to this in any way, shape, or form. Please, Mr. Please by Olivia Newton-John, Joe. The same year. The same year. I mean, Lowrider came out that year. Could you imagine this like Lowrider and then hearing the Let the World Turn come on right after Lowrider on the radio?
Oh, yeah. It's so wild to think that, and it feels like a crime that it sat for that long. 35 years, this kind of just sat in an attic.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. This isn't all the songs they recorded in that studio, correct? You mentioned that?
Yeah, originally they were going to record 12 songs. But after labels were showing no interest in what they had recorded, the tracks that were for this just kind of fell by the wayside. I think they record, and it was weird. Their story is weird, and because the documentary goes into it more in depth. After this, they try another shot at as a different name. I forget what it was called, but it was like basically like a Christian, but with this kind of rhythm and music.
Oh, that one over like a lead balloon, I'm sure.
It did, because people again, these are three guys that were raised very religiously. Like they, that's in their DNA from their father. And like a review basically said, like, hold the religion, please. Like, we love the music, but the religion stuff. And it's like, oh, like, Yeah, but and then after that, they just kind of go their separate ways, and that's life. Not every band makes it, even though a band like this should have, because this album should be like on the top 10 essential punk albums. Hell, it probably should be in like the top 20 or 30 essential rock albums, in my opinion.
Just a bit.
Yeah. So we've kind of gave our first thoughts. Paul, let's talk about tracks that stand out for you.
Should we try every?
Yeah, it's one of those rare. It's like 7 songs that like all Thriller, no filler. You know what I mean? Like it's 3 guys. They're young. They're hungry. They're creative as hell. Holy buckets.
Yeah, it's so right away jumping into the first song, Keep On Knocking, is like, whoa, holy shit. All right, we're starting right off the bat. And then it goes right into Rock and Roll Victim, which was like, all right, this is cool. And it's different enough. Like, again, one of the problems with punk bands you have, and I'll be the first one to admit this because I was big into the punk, is punk bands, they have that similar sound every single time. Then you get into Let the World Turn. And this blew my mind. That song is, I think, the highlight to me of the album because, and again, we talk about the music, the magic of track 3, just the magic
the drum
of that.
break on this, like it starts as like a ballad and then it speeds up and then it just has this crazy like almost drum solo, but it's not really like it's like holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, just the way it goes, right? So amazing. Then you get into you're a prisoner, freaking out. Where do we go from here? And Politician in the Eyes. And I had to look it up because I'm like, I've heard that song before. I've heard Freaking Out before. I know that. Where I heard that was on Ash versus Evil Dead.
Yes.
It was so good. It was so good.
Freaking Out to me, that's like holy crap, like because it was very like Ramonesy, like it sounds like if it wasn't for the fact that this album was like pretty much, unless you're one of the 50 people or whatever who had a copy of this, I would have said they ripped them off death.
Oh yeah. Question in my mind about that. Like, yeah. I'm floored. Is there a bad song on this album?
No. And I just kind of want to say my favorite track, I think, is Where Do We Go From Here? Because I love that chorus. And it's just so simple, but it's just so good.
Mm-hmm.
And then Politicians in My Eyes, which is just like, it's a weird, like I got to say, the bass lines on this. Like, it's just everything, these guys were so talented, but like what stands out a lot is like, the bass lines are so just good and weird and like how do you think of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, you have no blueprint.
Yeah, this just came up. It's like this sound they created feels like it came out like out of nowhere. Like holy crap, man!
Yeah, it came out of nowhere. I'm speechless because I've heard this. I listened to this a couple of times, and it is just so good.
Yeah, and it's like you can kind of hear some of the influences. Like you can hear some of the Motown stuff in there, and you can definitely hear like the Pete Townsend guitar styles in there, like kind of big riffs and that. But other than that, like it's original, and that's and it just came out in the weirdest time. like you pointed out, what was popular on the radio sounded nothing like this. Where was hard rock at this time? Like, yeah, you had Zeppelin or whatever, but yeah, nothing was this raw.
No, nothing was this raw. Yeah, just Joe, I'm floored.
I love it. I'm glad you like it. It's so the history behind it is so weird. Like even like I think it was like in the 80s, like David told his brothers, like, yeah, people will one day hear this stuff, but, I'll probably not be around for that. Like, Jesus, like, this is like one of those weird guys that just kind of like got it. Like, like, by the time people come around to this, it's I'm going to be already off this mortal coil, so like it's, and it's one of those things where, like, when you have a visionary behind a band that's as intense as this album, it really just, it makes a difference. There's so many like uninspired bands out there, and especially in the 70s when this was coming out, it was just like, you got Bread.
Yeah, you had
America. Like, what the? And they're selling, and then you got a band like Death who just can't get a break.
That's so unfortunate. That's so unfortunate. There's no bad. There's no bad here. I don't know.
I have a bad.
Okay, let's hear it.
That it wasn't discovered until 2009.
Well, yes. I have to agree with you on that. That is a bad that it wasn't discovered. This should have been discovered. I think, okay, critiquing where do we go from here wasn't, like, that one didn't catch me as much, and neither did Politician in my eyes. Just calling that out there.
That's fine.
But outside of that, it was so good. I don't know how to even describe this, right? And except that, take your favorite punk bands, put them in 1975, and the other thing with it is, again, Let the World Turn is the greatest amalgamation I've heard of punk with non-punk elements, because it moves. Like, it starts like as this experimental 70s song, jumps into fucking punk, and then goes back and then jumps into punk, right? Like, I think that's, to me, the Star Trek. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, it's fantastic. Again, there's no duds on this. It's so different. Like, even, I can't think of a whole lot of bands that would take chances like that musically. Because especially when you talk about punk, and you brought it up earlier, there's always this like paranoia of like, if you stray from the sound, like, you're a sellout. That's something like bands like The Clash had to deal with, and they, good for them that they were like, yeah, we don't care. But you had other bands that just kind of stuck to the 3-chord thing. And this Death were just like, yeah, 3 chords or whatever, but like we can add drum solos or whatever. Fuck it, who cares? Like, we can play.
Yeah,
that's the thing. These guys were really good musicians.
Great musicians. Great music. Like, the musicianship on this is absolutely amazing. I can't think of anything. I can't. I mean, what else do you cover on an album like this?
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's wild. It's so weird it came out when it did. I mean, the journey to that, and I love the fact that it's like, the two surviving brothers, this band was like a thing they did 30 years ago, not even in their wheelhouse. One of their kids call them up like, I just heard a song that you did in like 1975. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's got to be just like, oh yeah, that's got to be so surreal. So, like, imagine being the kid, Paul. Imagine like you at a party when you're 22, and your mom was like in some weird hardcore punk band in 75, and you heard her on the vocals. Like, you would probably crap your pants.
I would absolutely crap my pants. I would. I wouldn't know what I'd be like. What? This is you? You're in this? What? And I think it's awesome. I would do the same thing that the kids did. I'd be like, we're putting this out. Like, this is going to become a thing. We're going to make this a thing.
Yeah. And then the kids, to promote this, they started a cover band. called Rough Francis, which was a project David did. One of the last things he did before he died was a thing called Rough Francis. So it was like in tribute to him, and then to actually promote the music, like they covered this album as a cover band, covering the music that their dads made like 3 decades before.
I couldn't imagine doing that.
That'd be so weird.
It would be very, very, very weird to me. Yeah, Joe, I thank you for putting this in me. Now, I'm gonna make a joke here because as we were talking, I looked up a little bit to this. They did make another bad move though. I'm gonna say they made a bad move, which was they allowed one of their songs to be used for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5.
Well, you know what? I have no problem with that. It's not like these guys are rich.
No. I'm gonna explain to you why, because I got to go somewhere with this. Like, we could end this album, we could end this thing right now and just say, yes, hear it, get this album, buy this album. You need to understand that that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 was a shit show. It was hated, and you can't get it anymore. It was considered the worst video game of 2015 because they didn't have it done. Okay, it wasn't done. Like, the game is not on the disc; it's just a demo. You'd have to put in the game and download it. They don't support that download anymore. So if you bought this game even today, like in a bargain bin for $5, you spent too much money because the game is not on the disc. That's how broken it was.
Well, I hope the band got their money anyway. I haven't played it since PlayStation 2. I think it was Pro Skater 2 or whatever it was called back then. They're fun. I just, you play it one, you pretty much played them all. Plus, I'm all about Skate or Die on the NES.
Hell yeah, Skate or Die was the best. Yeah, I think the story of this is fantastic. I am going to go watch the documentary. There's no question about I'm going to watch the documentary because that's a thing that I now have to see.
Yeah, it's, if they go more detailed than me, that's why I just kind of did the crib notes thing, because it is an interesting story. It's, it's depressing a lot at moments. It's just, I think that's what, that's just, life in general. It's going to have highs and lows, but it's such an interesting story. And again, it's just, when in their own neighborhood, like their neighbors and everything, because playing the dumb white boy music.
Yeah, I it took me till the third song to realize that, wait a minute, these guys aren't white.
Yeah. And I didn't know. So when I first heard this, I was working at the Electric Fetus, and it was like a promo. And I threw it on. I was like, this is really good. And then that's when I started looking into it. I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
The journey to get this album out is just wild. It's just.
And it is a travesty that it took till 2009. Right? That's the year it came out, 2009?
Yep, 2009, yep.
That's an absolute travesty that's what happened there. It needed to be out much sooner than that, and these guys need it. I have a feeling this is kind of depressing on the same thing as In the Shadow of Motown. Like, these are people that were put out some amazing stuff and never got the recognition. Am I kind of on par with that?
Well, the weird thing is, from what I gathered from the documentary, is it was just their name. The labels had no problem with how the music sounded. They just hated the name. It wasn't like, oh, this is too aggressive. It was just like, that name's just fucking terrible. So, like, they could have had a deal like that, but, David had a vision, and he didn't want to compromise that, so.
That is absolutely amazing to me. And I'm glad that he had this vision and did it. Yep. I think this might be our shortest episode ever, Joe.
But the album's only 26 minutes long.
True. The album is only about 26 minutes long. It is a short album. That is the downside to it. It is a short album.
But it's totally worth it. I mean, there's, it's, with other bands, you kind of have the legacy of it. And a lot of times when we're talking about it, it's like all these other things that happened before and since. Like, these guys just kind of popped up in 75, did this. Nobody wanted to put it out, and then reappeared in 2009. And, they've, other things have been released since. I haven't listened to any of that.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, it's out there. It's on Spotify. Some of it's on Spotify. It's probably on YouTube Music or whatever you use. But I really just, for your own recommendations, I feel like this is an essential album for somebody to listen to.
Again, caveat. I'm going to give a caveat on it because I feel that way too. But if you are not into punk, this is not going to change you from not liking punk either. If you are a punk fan or have enjoyed punk and have and you consider yourself a true punk, you need to hear this. That's my take on it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's stuff on here for people who not necessarily are into punk, but just like kind of like more aggressive rock.
Yes. Okay.
That fits in there. You don't need this, the Liberty Spikes to appreciate this album. But yeah, if you're, if you're a fan of like White Stripes or something along like that lines, I think you'll find stuff on here you'll enjoy.
Oh, that I will agree with. Yeah. Yes. You're right. I shouldn't just say there's a lot of punk element on it though. So if you're like a person that likes, I like, just kind of casual rock on the radio.
Yeah. You're not going to like this.
No, you're not going to like this.
If you're listening to Bread in 75 and you're like, this is my music, you're probably not going to like this. And that's not to be snobby. Like, people's tastes are people's tastes. I don't really want to crap on people who like Bread, but this just probably is not for them.
No, I don't think it would be for them. So, all right. Yeah, yes. But again, if you fall in that category, if you are even intrigued by what we're hearing, you're like, that could be something I could listen to, do it.
Paul's kids loved it.
my kids were dancing their asses off to this. Running around and just being monsters to this thing.
I'm guessing it went over better in your house than Music from the Elder.
Went over way better the Music of the Elder. It's funny. By the way, I wanted to bring this. This is something I wanted to bring up as well because I thought this was funny. Do you realize that we did not recommend Music of the Elder, but we did recommend people check out Metal Machine music?
Yeah. There's a reason, Paul. Music from the Elder is fucking awful.
Yes. Music from the Elder is fucking awful. I have to say that So, now that we're getting caught up on things, Joe, what's going on?
Oh, at the Joe Down, we just released our review of Goodfellas.
Got your shine box ready?
Huh?
Got your shine box ready?
No more shines, Paul. It's Brown's favorite movie, so I figured I'd make him sit through having a joke on it a bit because I'm a terrible human being. Mm-hmm. And after that, what's it? Brown picked a movie I haven't seen. This Is the End, I think. Seth Rogen.
Oh, their mock kind of found footage thing. Is that what that one is?
No, it's like The World Ends,
Yep, and they're all at a party, but they're playing themselves, right?
Yeah, they're playing themselves. I've never seen it. It's not that I don't like those kind of movies. Like, I really enjoyed Pineapple Express and Superbad. I just can only take so much of it. Mm-hmm. So I just never got around to seeing this one. So that's what we have up next. Paul, what's going on? What's going on with your neck of the woods?
Oh, boy. Okay. A lot of stuff working behind the scenes. The Facebook page, the Joe Down Pod Down, is up. It is public now. It is. It's going to be a home of where you'll get a lot of our information on what we're doing here. I wanted to kind of build a better community for all of our podcasts and for fans of the Joedown as well, to just kind of hang out and talk and communicate. All of the podcasts that I have recorded that are ready to go are done and up, as we talked about at the beginning of the show. Weird news. I do the weird news show is going to be coming to that Facebook page with your blessing. So if you guys like kind of irreverent humor about I do it in an order of, I make fun of politics, then I go into actual like weird news, usually based around the UK and Europe, and then I end with some fact checking on things. Don't
forget I chime in there.
You do, and I love it. I love that you do. I absolutely love that you do. You chime in, other people chime in, and that's the fun of it, you guys. You get to talk to me directly, and I prefer that. Like, I have a banter comedic style to me, so the more people are talking to me and throwing shit my way, I love. So come and heckle me if you want to. Yeah, other than that, that's really just getting caught up, getting us where we need to be, getting everything. Oh, the YouTube page, the Pod Down YouTube page has all podcasts that were on separate locations, now centralized in the one, and that's what we'll be updating everything on, as well, podcast related. So, yay. That's all I got, Joe.
All right. So, Paul, what album are we going to be talking about next week?
So next week we are going to finally do the listeners don't know because I edited it out. We're going to be doing an album called.
Yeah, Paul changed his mind like mid-sentence.
Yes, I changed my mind mid-sentence on one of the other episodes. We are going to be doing an EP by Matt Pond, PA, and it is called Winter Songs. And it is a short album as well because it's an EP. It is about. It's really short. It's a really short album, but you'll like it. But I mean, I don't know because I've only heard one song off of it, and I really enjoyed that one song. It is. We'll talk about who Matt Pond, PA was, and again, they did an album before this, and they came out with this EP, and then that was supposed to be their big breakthrough. Have you ever heard Matt Pond, PA on the radio, or ever heard of them before, Joe?
Nope.
So that didn't happen. And we'll maybe get into that. All right. So that's what we're going to be doing next time around.
All right, Paul. So why don't you take us out?
You're freaking out.